everyone. Welcome to an Architect's Guide to Data Modeling. We presented this at last year's Dreamforce, and we are now bringing it to you for Apex Hours. My name is Georgi Savelyev. I am the founder and a certified technical architect at Stratus Carta. We're a boutique consultancy that provides expert services for communications, media, and energy and utilities cloud. I am joined by my colleague, Tuan.
All right. Good morning, afternoon, and evening, wherever you're joining from. Thank you, everyone, for joining and taking time to talk to us today. I'm Tuan Abdeen, also a Salesforce certified technical architect with 23 other Salesforce certifications. I have over 19 years of consultancy experience with over 14 years in the Salesforce ecosystem, both working in the partner ecosystem as well as previously with Salesforce professional services in Melbourne, Australia. I've done projects in different sizes and scales in my time, predominantly in the education, telecommunication, public sector, automobile, aviation, and professional services industries. I'm also now based in Dubai with Publicis Sapient in the MENA practice.
All right, thank you, Tuan. All right, so let's jump into the content. To introduce this topic, data modeling is kind of central to everything that you're doing in Salesforce. Similar to the foundation of a house, if you try and build a house without planning it ahead of time, maybe you realize after you built it that you want to add another bedroom, that's going to be really hard to do. You can't just go ahead and completely change the layout of the house without planning it ahead of time, without having the proper foundation there. And similarly, a data model is the foundation of your solution. If you decide after the fact to add some new objects, remove some objects, that will really impact the whole implementation. So this is super important, both in real life projects and for those of you on your CTA journey. If you get the data model wrong, this will result in technical debt, missing out-of-the-box features. This has a negative impact on pretty much all other areas of the implementation. So that means integrations, security, user experience, scalability, and more. This can cause increased license and project cost, and most importantly, this can cause unhappy stakeholders, and you would not be getting the maximum value out of your Salesforce implementation. So let's talk about the fundamentals of data modeling. We'll talk about the different types of objects that there are in Salesforce. We have three main types of objects. There are standard objects, custom objects, and managed objects. Standard objects are those things that we know and love that are available out of the box in a standard Salesforce org. So if we're thinking of something like a car dealership, we could model that as a product object, as an asset object, as a vehicle object if we're looking at automotive cloud, or potentially a combination of these three. So these are all things that are available, and you should leverage them as much as possible. It's important to be aware of the standard objects and what they are when you should use them. Next, we have custom objects. These are objects that are not available out of the box and are created custom by your team for your specific Salesforce org. So let's say we are an IT consultancy, we do IT projects. There is no standard object for modeling IT projects in Salesforce. So in that use case, we could go ahead, jump into the setup menu, into the object manager, hit that create custom object button, and create a custom object to represent an IT project. And finally, we have managed objects. These are objects that are not available out of the box, but are included in a Salesforce add-on or other managed package. So if we're talking about the world of CPQ, if we're configuring complex products, let's say that we're configuring laptops or desktop computers, our customers can choose different processors based on their needs, their requirements. Those processors can be modeled as product options. So when a customer purchases a laptop, they can choose which specific processor they want. This is kind of a mix between a standard and a custom object where it's not fully available out of the box, but it's included in an add-on or other managed package. There's a great reference at the bottom of these slides. You'll be able to get the slides along with this recording. The object reference, definitely take a look through that if you're not familiar with these standard objects. So in terms of decision-making, one of the hardest things to do when you're looking at a specific use case is to figure out which kind of object you want to use, and then if it's a standard object, which specific standard object you want to use. So this flowchart will help us make that decision. If we start from the top left, we look at our data modeling use case. The first question we need to ask ourselves is, are we dealing with large data volume? Large data volume means, are we dealing with millions of records or not? If we are in the millions of records or tens of millions or higher, then we are dealing with large data volumes, and then we go down on the flow chart. We need to ask ourselves, is that data mastered in Salesforce? If so, then we can look at a big object. Big objects are meant to store hundreds of millions or potentially more records, and these are primarily used for archival or reporting purposes. If it is not mastered in Salesforce, then we would look at if the data needs to be accessible in Salesforce or not. If it needs to be accessible in Salesforce, but it's not mastered in Salesforce, that means it's sitting in another system, and we can use what are called external objects to expose that data into Salesforce as if it was an object in Salesforce, but it's actually living outside of Salesforce, so we don't have to worry about the performance implications of large data volumes. If we don't need it in Salesforce, then we don't store it in Salesforce. We can keep it in whatever system it sits in today, or we can store it in an enterprise data warehouse. Now, if we're not dealing with large data volumes, then we would look at the right side of the diagram. So coming back to the earlier slide, now we're looking between standard objects, managed objects, and custom objects. We should look at our use case and see, does this align with a standard object? If so, then we should use a standard object. And then the next step is figuring out which exact standard object we would want to look at. If it doesn't align with a standard object, then we should see, does this align with a Salesforce add-on or an app exchange package? If yes, then we should go with a managed object. If no, we should go with a custom object. So a custom object is kind of the last resort if none of the other options fit in. And speaking of standard objects, it's important to understand kind of the key standard objects and the use cases for using them. So let's look at a few standard objects that would probably be used in the majority of implementations. We'll start off with leads. Leads are potential customers or prospects. So these are potentially people or businesses that we're interested in doing business with, but we aren't doing business with them yet. Then those leads will become accounts. Accounts are entities that we do business with. These can be B2C customers, these can be B2B customers, these can be partners, and there are a lot of other additional types of accounts. Then we look at contacts. Contacts are individuals that we do business with. So in the B2C side, oftentimes an account and a contact will be the same thing, and you may have heard of something called person account, which is kind of a junction between the two. On the B2B side, oftentimes we will have a company and then employees of those companies. So in that case, we would have one account, maybe 10 or 100 contacts. Then the core of Sales Cloud is opportunities. Opportunities are sales deals that generate revenue. On the Service Cloud side, we have cases. This is the hardened core of Service Cloud. These are customer support issues, inquiries, or feedback. Now, if we look at really any industry, generally the business process for all industries is the same with some tweaks depending on what the specific industry is. If it's focused on selling physical goods, if it's focused on selling services, that kind of thing. But at a high level, if we look at all businesses, all industries, they should generally go through this kind of process. So if we look at a high level, we start off with marketing. This is where we tell our prospective customers, here are the products or services we sell, and we try to get interest from them so then eventually we can make them a customer by selling them something. Then we enter the sales process. The sales process is about the actual process of selling something. So we understand who is the customer, what specifically do they want. We give them a quote for that if we sign a contract for that. Then we move to fulfillment. Fulfillment is about, okay, the customer has chosen what they want to buy. They've agreed to buy it. Now we need to actually deliver that product or service to them. And finally, we have service. This is after we've delivered the product or service to them, handling any issues that come up. So in the event of selling a physical good, maybe that physical good breaks, we need to repair it. That could be handled with a case service appointment, that sort of thing. So in some industries, this is quite straightforward. If you're selling physical goods like computers, it's probably very easy to understand what object fits into which area. If you're working on more exotic industries, it may take a little thinking to understand kind of which bucket it falls into. But think about your use case and then think about which bucket it falls into. Then once you identify the bucket, look at which object would make the most sense there. So if we look at marketing, we have campaigns and leads. Campaigns are basically events that we want to use for marketing to our customers. So this could be some kind of promotion where we get interest from customers, and we want to know that this customer came from this event or this promotion. Then we have leads. These are our prospects. These can be associated with campaigns. In the sales bucket, we have accounts and contacts. We discuss those. Those are basically our customers and individuals that work at the customers. We have opportunities. These are sales deals. We have quotes. These would be specific quotes that we're giving out to our customers. So in the context of a deal, maybe a customer wants the cheaper option, the mid-range option, and the most expensive option. We would model that as one opportunity with 3 different quotes with different variations on them. And then oftentimes we'll sign a contract for a customer. A contract is often a legal document that describes, kind of what we're doing, what kind of services or products we're selling, the terms and conditions, that sort of thing. On the fulfillment side, we have orders. This represents when a customer decides to move forward with a given quote, that would become an order. And this is basically the agreement for the customer to purchase that good or service and for us to deliver that good or service. And then assets, these represent things that the customer has purchased so that we can use them to raise cases against, potentially do a renewal opportunity, renewal order, that sort of thing. Basically, we understand what the customer has purchased. On the services side, we have cases. Again, these represent issues. Work orders and service appointments, these represent kind of physical work that's happening. We dispatch a technician to install internet. And service contracts, these represent a contract for providing a service. Oftentimes, this is something like a warranty service. So again, the idea of the slide is think about your use case, think which bucket it falls into. Once you identify the bucket, then figure out which specific object within that bucket it best maps to. So let's take an example here. Probably all of you have used a ride-sharing app like Uber. If we look at Uber, when we book a ride, what we do is we understand where our current location is, understand where we want to go, and then we decide kind of what type of ride do we want to have. The basic kind, the more comfortable kind, the more expensive kind, etc. How would we model this kind of booking of a ride in Salesforce based on what we've talked about so far? So the first thing we would want to do is see, is there some kind of standard object that fits in this use case? If we look at the object reference that I mentioned earlier, there is no standard object called ride or booking. So we don't have a easy, immediate option to look at. However, if we think about the previous slide, this would really fall under the fulfillment side of things, because when you hit that book ride button within your app, what you're really doing is saying, okay, I commit to buying the service and then paying you for taking me from point A to B. So really that falls under fulfillment. And then that is basically the definition of an order. So we would look at the order object as representing that booking or ride. Where it can get more complicated is imagine that you can book multiple vehicles at the same time. Then we would have to think about, okay, how do we extend this model to support that? We could do something like having one order with multiple order items, one for each vehicle. Maybe we have some kind of relationship between different orders to represent that. Make sure you think about all of the use cases, not just the most simple one when you're doing data modeling. All right, and I will hand it off to Tuan to tell us a bit more about some advanced topics, starting with custom objects.
All right, thank you. So talking about data model, as Yogi just mentioned, the data model is the foundation of your solution. So here we will talk about some considerations and solution patterns when it comes to custom object selection. Next slide, please. So are you still wondering of choosing a custom object? With great power comes great responsibility. Therefore, you need to choose it wisely. Have you thought about some of the following considerations before choosing a custom object? Firstly, are you going to reinvent the wheel? Have you checked to ensure there isn't a fit for purpose standard object for your use case? You will lose the out-of-the-box capability by deciding on a custom object over a potential standard object. In use cases such as lead conversion, forecasting, milestones and entitlements to manage your customer service level agreements, try to avoid the custom route. How about industry references? Have you checked the well-architected framework or the Salesforce Architects template gallery to see any of the industry reference data models fits your use case? In privacy and consent management model, appointment scheduling, or enterprise quoting, to name a few, try to avoid the custom route and leverage the industry reference data models. Have you also considered the data storage implications with custom objects? As we know, every record counts against 2 kilobytes, but standard objects such as assets, products, price book entries, they do not count against data storage. Therefore, when you're designing a large commercial product and pricing catalog or storing your purchased goods and services, try to consider the standard objects to minimize these additional data storage requirements. Next slide, please. So all said, you may still have a need to pick a custom object. So do not shy away from choosing custom objects as well. As you know, the Plus platform allows you to create up to 2,000 custom objects in an unlimited edition to accommodate your custom needs. Here are some of the custom object patterns to consider. Firstly, shadow objects. It is a concept of creating a custom object where the records will have one-on-one association to its parent record. It is typically useful pattern to make different sharing, setting on the shadow object over the master record. You can expand the per object governance limits, like the number of fields or the number of lookup fields, to optimize the licensing cost by leveraging a shadow object. Secondly, normalization versus denormalization. By default, the Salesforce canonical data model is normalized. With custom objects, you have the luxury to make it normalized or denormalized. Normalization is a technique where it involves organizing data into multiple objects to reduce the data redundancy. It is typically used in online transaction processing systems to speed CRUD operations. But in contrast, in denormalization, the data is centralized, stored on the same object to improve performance by simplifying the complicated table joins. It is usually used in analytical processing systems to speed query and analytics. Thirdly, have you looked at borrowing data models from the industry add-ons? Add-ons like CPQ, Field Service, Salesforce Industry Clouds have amazing data models designed by the industry experts. So if you need only one or few of the features offered by these add-ons, why not referencing the data model and custom build the capability or the functionality to optimize the licensing cost? As an example, Action Plan Template Model, which is a reusable framework that you can use to schedule customer visits. So rather than purchasing the entire add-on, why not refer the Action Plan Template Model and custom build the solution? Next slide, please. Next, we will talk about the foundational principles of data governance beyond your data modeling. So here we will talk about some of the considerations. And these considerations do not directly impact your standard versus custom object modeling choice. But data governance is a very important step towards ensuring your data is secure, accurate, and usable with adhering to your corporate compliance needs. So I will today briefly go through some of them now. Firstly, data encryption. As you know, certain industries and regions may have strict guidelines about encrypting sensitive data such as personally identifiable information, example, your customer's date of birth, or protected health information such as patient's health records. Therefore, try to leverage Salesforce Shield platform encryption to encrypt this sensitive data at rest. Secondly, data masking. The sensitive nature of this PII and PHI data in industries such as financial services and healthcare is high. So when it comes to sandboxes with unmasked sensitive customer data can be risky and can be exploited by your developers. Therefore, the need of anonymizing, obfuscating, and masking this sensitive data is critical in such industries. So therefore, consider leveraging Salesforce Data Masker as a solution. Next, large data volumes and data archival. Have you considered and calculated the data volumes of your use cases to see if you are hitting or risk of hitting an LDV threshold? Have you considered custom indexing, tuning your queries, denormalization, data archival, and leveraging any commercial solutions to improve your data governance? Next slide, please. Backup and restore. Do not forget about data backup and restore for your business continuity. Try to consider Salesforce backup and restore solutions or any third-party solutions such as Odaseva or Own Backup for these type of use cases. Governance as a whole. The great data model that you have built will fall apart soon if you do not regularly maintain it. So set up data governance bodies, data stewards to make sure your data is relevant and stored efficiently. Try to document and distribute your data model, your data dictionary, and meaningful descriptions of your objects, fields, relationships with all your stakeholders. And last but not least, consider the relevant compliance regulations when designing a data model, such as GDPR, HIPAA, PCI, to name a few. Try to leverage the consent management objects, the data classifications, and any third-party solutions such as Odaseva or Transcend data privacy solutions to align with your corporate compliance needs. I'll hand it over back to Georgi to talk about some closing thoughts.
Thanks, Duan. So to wrap it up, one of the key things that we talked about is that you should always start with standard objects when you're looking at a given use case. Look at your business requirements and try to map them to the closest fitting standard object or managed object if possible. If not, then use a custom object and make sure you use them wisely. If you don't find a good fit and or can't mitigate gaps, then you go with a custom object. Like Duan mentioned, if you have an amazing data model, but you don't have governance around it, people don't know about it, you're not updating it, it will very quickly become not amazing. So make sure that decision-making includes key business and IT stakeholders to ensure alignment, the data model is optimal, and meets strategic business needs. From a documentation point of view, document and publish the data model. Maintaining an updated data dictionary will enable faster design, build, and also serve as a reference to help with compliance requests. Again, if people are not aware of your data model, it will not be used and will cause you challenges going forward. And nowadays, privacy is becoming more and more important. It's very important to make sure that you think about this when you're doing data modeling. Make sure to use the data classification metadata fields and the consent management objects to ensure you manage your customer privacy requirements. Now, before you go, we have an extra exercise to apply what we talked about in this session to some use cases. So you can flex those muscles of choosing between a standard, managed, and custom object, and then if it's a standard object, figuring out which one you want to go with. So to start off with, we'll alternate between the different scenarios, me and Tuan. To start off with, we'll do kind of a practice one together about healthcare. For this one, I'll talk you through the thought process. For the future ones, we'll pause for a few seconds so you can think about it before we tell you the answer and tell you our rationale. If you want to play along with this, pause the video, think about it, write down your rationale, and then see what we say and see if it makes sense, see if you agree or not. All right, so we have a fictional company, Universal Containers. It's a healthcare manufacturing company. Hospitals purchase ultrasound, MRI, CT, and other machines. Purchased machines are tracked in case of issues or repairs are needed, and to be able to upsell the hospital a new model after several years. How do we model the purchased machines? Now, before I show the answer, let's think back to that slide with the chevrons. Remember, we had marketing, sales, fulfillment, service. Try and think about which of those buckets does this scenario fall into, these purchased machines, which of those buckets does that fall into? And then within that bucket, try and think about which object fits in the best. So here I would say that we would model these purchased machines as assets. And then why assets? So assets represent fulfilled goods and services. Here, a hospital is purchasing the machine. After they purchase the machine, we represent the machine as an asset. So then we can raise cases against it. We can place a new order against it. We can do a renewal opportunity against it, and so on. Oftentimes, assets are used for tangible goods, so physical machines, but they can also be used for intangible services like software licenses, extended warranty, etc. So consider the other use cases that you might want to use assets for as well. So we might want to represent the warranty or licenses sold alongside these virtual machines as assets as well. And as an extra bonus, these do not consume data storage because we're using that asset object. Now I will hand it to Tuan for the next scenario.
All right. So second use case that we are looking at is on a non-profit organization. So in this case, in this scenario, Universal Container is a non-profit organization. They are predominantly focused on fundraising and donor engagement. So the organization aims to build a Salesforce application to manage their donors as well as the recurring donations. So let's pause and think about how are we going to model these donation records. Going back to that same principles, are there any standard objects that we could leverage to model these donation records? Or are there any managed objects? Or should we need to pivot to a custom solution? All right. So let's think about this. So can we hit next? So I'm thinking about probably an opportunity looking at these standard object solutions. So why opportunity? So opportunity records typically used to record revenue by the amount, date, and person or an organization. That revenue in this case could be a grant or a donation. Typically, businesses use opportunities to track sales deals, but non-profit organizations, they can use opportunities to track donations. Hence, an opportunity could be a good fit. But why custom? Will the donor need to access these donation records from a community point of view? In that case, can opportunity object can be accessible from a customer community because these donors could be a customer in a B2C instance, in an environment. So if we need to provide this opportunity in a community, we need to uplift to a partner community. Knowing this is a non-profit organization, they might also consider or be cost conscious. Hence, uplifting to a partner community, I personally feel as an overkill for these B2C customers. Secondly, again, being on a non-profit, execs might also be warning you about why, even for the backend users, we leverage opportunity if there is no other sales-related objects that we leverage, such as the products, the price books, the orders, quotes, or sales contracts. Why do we need to purchase Sales Cloud? In this case, a custom object could be also a possible solution to leverage the Salesforce platform as a license instead of purchasing Sales Cloud. So this could be another use case or reason for you to stick to a custom object solution. Back to you.
All right, so use case number 3 is telco, the best industry. So now Universal Containers has changed their business and they are a telecommunications company. B2C customers have family plans with multiple people using services and multiple people paying for the services. How do we model the customer family plan, users, and payers? Again, try and think to the different chevrons that we have: marketing, sales, fulfillment, service. Which bucket would this fall into? And then within that bucket, which object would be the best fit? Pause, think about it for a few seconds. All right, so here I would recommend using the account object. We briefly talked about person accounts. Person accounts, you may think B2C person account. It's easy to kind of make that automatic jump, but don't do that. So in Communications Cloud and Media Cloud and Energy Cloud, this concept of the account model is very important, especially for family accounts, for businesses. If you really think about it, a family runs like a small business with a few employees. So the way we would model this is use the lookup relationship from an account to a parent account to represent these different things. And we would use different record types to represent these different things. So the overall B2C household would be a parent account. That would be a consumer account record type. Underneath that, as children, we would have service accounts to represent the users of the services, and then billing accounts to represent the payers of the services. And then the service account and billing account would have the consumer account or the household account as a parent. So we use this account hierarchy to group all of these things together. And the beauty of this is then when we talk about the sales process, when we talk about assets, when we talk about cases, we can specifically link all of those things to whichever account we're talking about. If we have an issue with service, we can link that to the service account. If we have an issue with billing or payment, we link that to the payment account. So it gives us this very clean separation, but also links these things together. And again, it's easy to just jump to the conclusion that, okay, B2C person account, but don't do it. The reason for that is because person accounts cannot participate in the hierarchy. And here, hierarchy is kind of the key feature that we're leveraging. And Tuan, back to you.
All right, let's talk about the next use case, which is around education. So universal containers is a university. Students with very low marks or scores in their exams are assigned to a different advisor based on their department, seniority, and other factors to help their students to improve on their marks. So again, think about this with that funnel where this fits in. How do you model these students to advisor assignments? So if you look at from the marketing to the service assignments, where does this fits in? Think about it. All right. So here, look, if you look at the funnel, this is more around servicing the student, helping them to improve in their grades. So cases could be a good fit if you're thinking about standard objects. So, but this is nothing to do with, as we know, around marketing and sales, but servicing the student. So with cases, you have the standard out-of-the-box capability that comes with, such as omni-channel routing, escalation rules, entitlement and milestones to manage the service level agreements. But which would you use to assign the students to advisors in this case? This is not a traditional case management scenario where customers are raising a problem or an issue. But instead, in this scenario, what we call is a care plan for our students. We are letting or supporting that student with a care plan to help improve their grades. So as part of the care plan, the student advisor may oversee it, but it also may require a supporting team or care team to help the student to improve their marks. So this is where I feel you can leverage the care team, which is standard case teams, so that the advisor, by owning the student care plan or the case record, still can add the additional members like the teachers, the educational execs to support the student with the standard case management capability. Back to you.
All right, let's talk about logistics. Universal Containers is a B2C package shipping company. Customers drop off packages, pay, and then can track their packages. How do we model the package shipment? Again, think back to our chevrons, think which part of the business process does this fall into, and then which object within that part of the business process would fit the best. Let's think about it for a few seconds. Now let's see what it is. Okay, so here I would say that this falls under the fulfillment. So this is very similar to the Uber example that we're discussing earlier, but rather than booking a ride, this is shipping a package, but fundamentally it's the same idea. When the customer drops off the package and pays for it, they're basically saying, okay, I want your service of shipping the package. I commit to paying for it by giving you cash. That's it. This is an order. We need to fulfill the order. So very similar to that Uber example, we can use an order plus order items. If we can ship more than one package at a time, we could potentially do parent-child orders as well to manage the different packages. This is kind of the sales process, but there is no negotiation. Maybe on the B2B side, customers can negotiate for pricing and stuff, but on B2C, typically you would say, okay, if you want to ship it, it's going to cost you X, or we can do expedited shipping for Y. There's no negotiation. They just choose X or Y and move forward. So here, this would be purely fulfillment. We would really skip that sales process with opportunities and quotes. And back to you, Tuan.
All right. Our use case number 6 is more around lifestyle. So in this example, Universal Container is a gym and a personal coaching business. On signing up for subscription, customer enter their health and fitness goals, and they monitor their progress on their goals. and coaches can assign actions linked to those goals. So how do we, in this case, model the health and fitness goals? Again, going back to that chevron, where does this fits in the life cycle? Any standard objects can be used for this model, or do we need to think outside the box? Let's pause for a minute. All right. So what do you think? So looking at the fitness goals, potentially looking at the standard objects that Georgi introduced, there won't be, or we don't see a first party data standard object that can be used for goals, to model goals. So hence custom object can be a good fit. So why custom? So this goes across sales, fulfillment, and service, but doesn't map to any standard object, as I mentioned. So we should, as a separate note, we can also look at the industry reference models to see if there's no standard objects, can any of the industry references can help here. So for example, health and education cloud data models may have goals. For an example, coming from an education background, there's an object called goal definition as part of education cloud. So potentially, so the students' goals can be used to manage in goal definition in education cloud. Possibly, if you want to go with an industry reference, you can use the goal definition and custom build the capability around that. Thank you.
Good, thank you. So that was it for these exercises. Hopefully that gives you an idea of how to approach this, a framework for how to approach it. These are just our ideas of what the correct answer would be in this use case. In real life, probably what you would want to do is say, okay, we could use standard object A, standard object B, custom object, list the pros and cons, discuss them, agree on which way you move forward. You wouldn't need to just immediately make a decision, but hopefully this gives you the thought process of how you can make that decision going forward. So that's it for this session. I hope you found that useful for you. I hope you understood kind of the basic and some advanced concepts around data modeling and a framework for how to approach it. If you found the session useful, please follow Apex Hours on LinkedIn, YouTube, check out the website, follow us on Twitter as well. And we look forward to the next session. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks once again. Bye-bye.
Enjoy. Bye.